Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting, Policy and Finance Committee. Just to kick off the meeting, our usual reminder that the meeting is being recorded in accordance with our recordings of meetings policy. The recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the council website in due course. We don't have any members. Oh no, you do. If any member of the public doesn't wish to be filmed, then please let us know and we'll direct you to where you can sit that's not covered by the camera. Presenters and public speakers will be recorded, but those preferring not to be recorded can submit written representations to the clerk. We have 20 minutes on the agenda for public participation with 5 minutes per speaker. Items not on the agenda cannot be debated today, but the chair or clerk may provide a brief response, follow up in writing or discuss at a later date. Respectful conduct is expected at all times. Disruptive behaviour will not be tolerated, and the chair may intervene or ask questions to leave them. Ask individuals to leave the meeting to maintain order. Apologies. Councillors, by attending this meeting, you have decided you abide by Section 25 of the Localism Act 2011, and are attending this meeting with open minds to hear, participate in debate, information support. Do you agree to cast your vote in a reasoned and considered manner? Should any councillor therefore believe they are unable to do so, or would wish to ensure transparency of commitments to other bodies, we recommend you declare them invited to do so. So, first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We haven't received any apologies for this evening's meeting. Councillor Constable is on his way, but just running late due to traffic.
Thank you very much. And I believe the minutes of the last meeting note that we would accept apologies that we didn't get for the previous meeting, but I believe we haven't received any of those either.
We did not.
So wanted to note that for everybody that we've cleared that and there aren't any. Thank you very much. We don't have any apologies to approve. Register of interest or dispensations. Anybody have any interest to declare? No? Is there anything on the agenda? Thank you. Then we're on to minutes of the last meeting, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of September. Any comments, queries, questions on the minutes of the last meeting? I hold for a second to see if Josh has any comments on the minute.
Much how?
Not personally, no. Good evening, Josh.
Slight swim on the way here.
Do you have anything to raise on the minutes of the last meeting before we approach to accept them?
I'm happy to accept them.
Wonderful. Okay, do I have a proposer for those minutes then? And a seconder. All in favour? Anyone else in favour of it?
Sorry, I wasn't here.
Oh, good, thank you. Right, that's great. Thank you very much.
Have you got them? Have you got them? You've got
Yes.
them.
Thank you very much. And then to receive an update on matters arising that were not included on the agenda.
I suppose there's only one update, which is the clerk to investigate the cost of the funding page advertisement in Eastleigh Network magazine with some or all costs paid up front, and the report the findings to full council. We have requested, or we have had a cost provided, but a meeting took place between myself, Deputy Clerk and Community Engagement Officer, and there'll be a full proposal written up by the Community Engagement Officer being brought back to council.
Okay.
How we would like to communicate.
Fantastic. Thank you. In which case, on to public participation. Does anybody have anything to say at this point before we move on to the agenda? No? Okay. Thank you. So then we're on to council policies. To receive for approval the following new policies for adoption: the data protection policy, officer member protocol, and the press and media policy. Shall I kick off by asking whether anybody has any questions or issues to raise on any of these 3 policies?
I have some questions and proposed amendments for the press and media policy.
Okay. In which case, can I suggest that we have a proposal to accept the data protection policy and the officer member protocol, and then we'll move on to the press and media policy next?
I'll propose both of those policies.
Thank you very much. Second. All those in favour of adopting those 2? Wonderful. Thank you very much. in which case, onto the press and media policy. Councillor Constable, you have a question?
Okay, I've got a few. So page 2, when speaking in a personal capacity, councillors must not use the title councillor or refer to their council position, as this implies the statement reflects council policy. I'd suggest we remove that, because in one of the previous ones it says make clear that when you're speaking to the press or making a statement on social media, that if you're not speaking in representation of the council, that you make that clear. So I would say that's covered. Do you want me to go through all of them and then, or do you want
Yeah, go on.
Okay.
Go through yours.
Okay, also on page 2, it's acceptable to state disagreement with a decision made in an open meeting that councillors must not use the press or media to undermine council policy. I'd like a definition of undermining council policy, and also concern I'd like to raise that actually in raising disagreement or reasons why a councillor may have not voted, it's likely that you would go into the reasons why, which could be an argument made, then you're undermining council policy, even if your grouping is not currently running council, which I think kind of gags opposition members. And then also on page 2, ensure that their comments reflect agreed council policy. I'd like to propose we amend it to ensure comments accurately represent agreed council policy. Just because, again, if you're speaking to a member of the public or putting something up on social media to explain why you voted a certain way, you would be speaking against it and therefore liable to come under the code of conduct. And then finally, on page 3, councillors must refrain from making personal comments or statements publicly during such time unless authorised to do so. This is the crisis communications part. I propose amending that to councillors must refrain from making personal comments or statements publicly where doing so may undermine or contradict crisis response. Because, again, it's likely that in that situation we would all be encouraged to communicate as widely as possible. It was the case during COVID that we did that. We appreciate that was before this council. But that was the guidance. So again, it's just to tidy it up rather than to disagree with the what it's doing. That was everything.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay. Since I was writing down as you went through. So, remind us again what the first point was. Sorry.
So page 2, when speaking in a personal capacity, councillors must not use the title councillor. Continues. I propose removing that section.
Any other thoughts on that point? Anyone? Councillor Gifford?
It does appear to be a little bit of a contradiction, because when speaking in a personal capacity, then potentially you're not going to be speaking as councillor whoever. But there could be instances where, through naivety, people would then quote their name as Councillor Smith. And I think potentially that just clarifies that position, because actually if you are speaking in a personal capacity, you shouldn't be using the term councillor, because you're either speaking as a personal, in a personal capacity, or as a councillor. I just think that, bearing in mind that this, we are a parish council, and this is a policy for the future, I think it might just help that you can point people that when you because when speaking, I mean, that could be on a whole multitude of things. It could be on a phone or whatever, you could accidentally be answering an email to the press, you could be speaking to anybody. It's just something in black and white that you can point to that just re-emphasises the point that you're speaking in a personal capacity, so therefore you can't tag on the end councillor. And the same thing if you are emailing somebody, and my personal view is, and then on the email that you've got at the bottom, it's from Eastleigh Town Council, councillor so-and-so. It can be one or the other, and I think it just clarifies it, and sort of separates out the two. That would be my view on it, because you're either one or the other. It's something to be able to point new members to, people that perhaps don't take policies as seriously as we do round the room.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Richardson.
Sorry to put the clerk on the spot. Could I ask ask for your advice on this, obviously having worked in other councils and seen policies like this before.
I actually have seen a no longer with this councillor make a personal statement and put councillor name attributed to that individual. Now, whoever attributed it, I don't know, but that was how that person was put in the press, in the communication, as a councillor, but the actual communication was personal. So I would say, if it doesn't harm, leave it in, because it is a good emphasis to actually ensure that people know that you know, it's difficult, because that is your role and that's how people know you, and a lot of people, especially people, members of the press, like to attribute the higher ranking level in their view of the person who's talking to them.
Thank you. Personally, I agree with Councillor Bicknell's point. I think it's useful to have something to refer to, and it just clarifies a point that follows up from the previous point around making sure that if you're speaking in personal capacity, then that's clear. So the only thing I wonder is whether it would be any better if it said councillors should not use rather than must not use, as it's a guideline rather than black and white. The clerk is
Or you're splitting hairs in the law then, which is that then if somebody does use it, you have no policy to actually fall back on, which is they should, they didn't.
Okay. Councillor Bicknell?
The only thing I would say with reference to that, I mean, if you were speaking to the press in a personal capacity, what they actually print you as is up to them. You can say, I'm speaking to you in a personal, please don't use my title, and then you read the press, find out it says Councillor Smith or Councillor Bicknell, because they just like to stir things up.
That's true.
And they don't always, our local press don't always report accurately.
Okay.
So, you know, sometimes you're going to fall foul to that policy through no fault of your own.
Okay. Councillor Gutswell, would you like to propose an amendment on this one that we can vote on?
Do you want me to propose individual ones on each of them, or do you want me to propose?
I think individually would be easier,
Okay,
because then
then
we take them in turn.
I propose removing that.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay. And those in favour of removing that line? And those against removing that line? And or abstaining, Councillor Bonnet. Barrett, sorry. Never had a deciding over there.
First time for everything.
Makes it fun.
Then I'm going to side with against, so we keep that line. The next proposal was
So, still on page 2, further down, it is acceptable to state disagreement with decisions in an open meeting. I'm proposing, well, I'm asking for a definition of undermine council policy, and my point being that either we need to define what undermining is in there or remove it, because again, when speaking to the press about why you voted against the proposal, you would de facto be undermining that proposal, which would mean you're in breach of this policy.
I think that's a fair challenge. Anybody, including the clerk, want to put forward a proposal for what undermine might be defined as? So I'm not suggesting you put forward a proposal to the clerk, but to suggest what that might be.
So if you take the word undermining, it says weakening confidence or authority. There's a common and often subtle form of undermining. It can involve questioning abilities, rumours, demeaning them in a way that makes them feel less sure of themselves or the position. Obviously that's referring to an individual. I have not seen any comments made by councillors who disagreed with decisions go to that level of undermining, as in making people have distrust in the actual corporate body which that councillor is representing. I think in the law code of conduct monitoring officers you'd have to go a very long way to actually have an undermining comment be attributed against you, expressing the fact that you voted against something because of the following reasons. You would have to say, therefore, the council is not secure in its work going forward. You'd have to take it one step further and criticise the actual work of the council that made the decision. It's respecting the decision of the corporate body, but you can still express the fact that you didn't agree with that decision.
So could we then amend it to undermine council staff or the authority of the council?
It's not really the council's staff, is it? It's the corporate body decisions that this is referring to. So undermining the council policy. It's your corporate body. So you as a councillor are a member of a corporate body. There is a view from some councils that if a decision is made, your opportunity to debate that is within a public forum, and then the decision is made, and if it's a corporate decision, you should get behind it. This allows you to actually make a comment about it, but you can't go as far as saying that, criticising those that made a decision that was different to you. That in effect is democracy.
That's the big one.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. But what we've got to bear in mind here is that we are a parish council, and so for higher authorities, this really doesn't come into play because we don't really have politics. And actually, in higher authorities, well then that's exactly what you get in higher authorities, because that's actually what they do. It is right and proper as a councillor, if you don't agree with a policy and you don't vote for it, as to what your reasons are. You know, you can openly say, well, I don't agree with it, I didn't vote for it, and my reasons are X, Y, and Z. But actually, we've got to remember it's council policy, and it's councillors that set policy, not staff. So this is nothing to do with staff, and that's a completely different thing. Councillors set policy, staff put that policy into practice. So then it does come the question of where do you then undermine the council policy, which is the sticking point in this. Because actually council policy is decided democratically by the most votes that win, and we need to respect that. Doesn't mean to say you necessarily have to agree with it, mind you. But it's where would the line be that you start undermining that policy? That's the tricky one.
Okay.
How do you quantify that? Actively undermining the policy. Bear in mind the only tool you have for councillors is the code of conduct. That's the only tool you have against councillors.
So, having heard all of those points, Councillor Constable, do you have a proposal on how to reword that?
I would propose removing it.
Removing.
Otherwise we will be here all night trying to define undermine. So I would propose removing that clause.
Okay.
Unless somebody has a definition of undermine that we can use.
Okay, in that case, we have a proposal. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? And then I'll come to a debate on the proposal.
I would tentatively second it based on the fact that we're a parish council, but with the caveat, it's this undermine bit. It's that definition is the tricky bit.
Okay, but the proposal is to remove this line entirely.
So I'll hold back. I'll wait for further debate and options.
So do we have a second for Councillor Constable's proposal to remove the line entirely? Councillor Marks, thank you. So going to debate on whether to remove it entirely or not, I actually disagree with what Councillor Bickman has said. I think it's fundamentally important to the way the parish councils operate that we are a body corporate. So any decisions that we make as a council are the decisions of the council, so they shouldn't be undermined, and I think it's worthwhile having that reinforced through the policy. So personally, I wouldn't want this to see this removed. Does anybody else have anything to say on this before we have a vote? Councillor Constable?
Yeah, I do get the logic behind this, and that's why I wasn't against it entirely, but this council is already a political council. We have political parties. Everyone, with the exception of one councillor, was elected on a political party, and we have multiple other political parties active in the town area who will be contesting the next elections. So we are a political council, and I think that this gives too much leeway to, again, the majority to enforce what could be draconian policy on the minority, which is why my concern is there. Unless we can, again, if we came back at a later date with a definition of undermine, I'd be happy to do it, because then we have something we can reference. This is too airy for me, and it needs to be clearer.
Okay. Any other comments on that before we vote? Councillor Barrett?
I would have thought that the word undermine is quite clear. The definition is you're undermining the authority of the council. So I don't see a problem with the interpretation of that word. Any derogative action or negative comments against the council is undermining the council. So I'm quite happy with it being in there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitman?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, obviously I said councillors make policy, staff enact it, but at the same time, that's the mechanism. But at the end of the day, that then becomes council corporate, and so therefore, if you're criticising the policy, you are criticising the council, because democratically the policy has been agreed and staff are enacting that. And actually, I think Councillor Barrett is right. And you can't have, if you have people criticising, disagreement, I didn't vote for it, for this, that and the other, but then to actively try and destroy that policy, I undermine it, and actually negatively potentially work against it, you can't have in any council. It becomes destructive.
Okay, should we move to a vote then? So all those who are in favour of the proposal to remove this line entirely from the policy? That's 3. And those who are against removing it? 4. Okay, thank you very much. So that's not seems to be correct. And your last issue, Councillor?
Sorry, there are 2 more. So I'm requesting an amendment on the end of page 2, ensure their comments reflect agreed council policy. Yeah, I'm proposing amending this amend to say, to ensure comments accurately represent agreed council policy.
Reasoning why?
Because again, if you're speaking in opposition to why something was passed, your comments are not reflecting agreed council policy, they're in direct contravention to it. Whereas by saying councillors are expected to accurately represent what's been agreed by the council, you're not gagging, but you're ensuring that there isn't misinformation put out in statements.
Okay. I think that's a proposal. Are you
Yes.
happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Do we have a seconder for that one? Councillor Richardson. Any comments before we go to a vote? No? Okay. So those in favour of changing it to ensure their comments accurately reflect agreed council policy. Sorry?
Accurately
Represent, sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
accurately represent agreed council policy. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous.
Okay, and then the final one is on page 3. Councillors must refrain from making personal comments or statements publicly during such times unless authorised to do so. I'm proposing amend. Councillors must refrain from making personal comments or statements publicly where doing so may undermine or contradict the crisis response.
Yeah.
Again, just to clarify.
Yeah. So you've got another proposal. A seconder for that one, Councillor Richardson. I'll just say I agree with that, and I think actually that reflects what we discussed as a working group as well. Was that our sentiment was councillors should be supported of sharing that message, but shouldn't be making personal comments that undermine things. So yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So we have the proposal. Does anybody else want to say anything before I go to a vote? Nope. Okay, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So then, having had those three amendments, would somebody like to propose we adopt the policy? Councillor Richardson, and seconder. Councillor Bignell, and those in favour? Those against? Okay, I mean, it carries. I think we have a majority to adopt that.
Could I have my abstention recorded in the minutes, please?
So those were the three new policies, and then we have the publication scheme. Which has been amended. Does anybody have any points to raise on this before we go to vote on it? Councillor Marks?
Just basically, everything here is on the website, and I just wondered how we can publication scheme actually to people that are not on the website. I can't understand why we continually say everything's on the website, but not everyone uses the website.
Okay. Clark, want to respond to that?
Okay, so the premise of the whole policy is if they want to find information, where can they find it? I think a element that we could do is where we say available on the website, we could use the phrase council website, email or hard copy available through the clerk or available from the council office as well. So we could lead with the fact it's on the council website, which is the Transparency Act requirement for the publication guide, and so it's the easiest one to chase down. But there is no reason why we could not actually use a standard response, and there are a few different ones there, but a standard response to say council website, email or hard copy available from the council office for all of the bits that are on the council website. Would that suffice?
Well, basically, people still would have to go on the website to find out they could get a hard copy. There's no publication. You haven't got it on the front door to be able to say that if you need any of this, then basically knock on the door, make an appointment, come and see me, and we'll go through it, and I'll give you a hard copy. So I just can't see how everyone's going to be able to see all of this unless they've been on the website. Even with your response there, you still have to go on the website to request a hard copy.
Am I allowed to answer
Please
that?
do.
We are working on the front doors. And actually one of the things that we have put is that we are available, the hours, that the decals that are going on either side will, on the council side, will clearly say that we are available for anybody to drop in, and we will provide them with information on how the council works. But that is only if they happen to walk past that window. It's limited, but we have that in plan.
I do think it's an interesting point though, because especially if the publication scheme itself is on the website, then how does anybody know what's in the publication scheme? I realised that we could probably go down a rabbit hole on that one. But I wonder if maybe it's something to think about for the future around whether perhaps we could be using notice boards and things like that, just to make people aware that they are able to request copies of our policies by visiting the council. It's not, they don't have to only look at the website to find something like that. Councillor Richardson, did you have something?
That's a different point.
Okay, Councillor Bickman.
Councillor Marks is right. I mean, to a degree, social isolation, people that actually aren't, illiterate, and obviously that has been a growing problem for many years now, and it's not just within councils, but every facet of life. You try ringing up, your supplier of whatever. They'll all direct you to their website or to their app or something else, and eventually you might actually get to speak to a human being. The only thing I was going to say on this is, and it's before my time, before I was interested, but
how did this stuff get advertised before we had the internet? I can't imagine that all of this stuff would have been up on a huge great notice board outside a council office that you then, and the point has been made, if you happen to walk past it. You know, I don't know what the answer to that is, other than, no, and you couldn't post all this stuff outside council offices because you have no windows, you have no doors, and that. But it's how was it done in the past before we had the internet?
I don't think it was. I don't think it was.
No,
It's only the technology that has moved on that allows this to happen. Go back before this, people just visited the council office and asked questions.
Or ask the councillor perhaps.
yeah, as I have now learned in the process of looking at the data protection policy, the publication scheme was part of the Freedom of Information Act, and the Freedom of Information Act postdates the creation of the internet. So this specific requirement didn't exist beforehand. So yeah, that is an interesting point. Although something else that Councillor Bickman just said just made me think that it might be useful to mention on the publication scheme around the availability of this information in alternative formats, which I believe we've put somewhere else. I think I feel like I've read it in a policy earlier, but it might be useful to have it on the publication scheme. Councillor Marks.
So, just an answer to Councillor Bickman.
I was hoping you would.
How did we find out before? Because you had it in newspapers and also half yearly, you used to get that big A3 paper from Eastleigh Borough Council, and in there had all the information that we required. So that's how we find out. But I do take the point of our chair with regards to, and he's taken the words out of my mouth, with regards to notice boards and with the asset transfers, then the notice boards basically can have all this notification in there.
It's a lot of it though.
I would anticipate it is just a statement of where you would go to get hold of copies, rather than having a whole list of these are all of the policies.
Thanks for going well, that was what I was sort of guessing at. It's like,
In much the same way as the notice board would have our website on it, it could also say you can make an appointment at the offices at these times to have access to this information.
Sorry, Chair, but from the strategic plan, we were going to have these whizzy things that were Eastleigh information on, where you touch a button and it will come up, surely, all situated everywhere.
QR codes.
No, I thought we were going to have information. You know, when you go to West Quay and they've got an information there to say where all the shops are. I thought in our strategic plan we were saying something similar to that, or I'm in fantasy world.
I don't recall, and I'm conscious that this has now gone very much
That's
off
fine.
the agenda item. So I'd like to bring us back to, does anybody want to propose this?
I have another point to make, sorry, a very quick one. The bit under members' allowances and expenses, the way it's written suggests that I'm paid £500 and I'm not. I have a budget line available to spend as the chair, but I'm not actually receiving an allowance of £500, am I? I have the ability to spend £500.
I guess the fact it says receives
It's
is
that,
perhaps
that's,
not very...
because I do not get paid £500.
Where does it say that?
It's the bottom of page 2. I think that's an interesting point.
I think it should, the chairman has an allowance available or something like that. I just don't like the word receives, because I do not receive £500.
The chairman has an annual allowance of £500 at their disposal.
Yeah, that would work.
For access to...
I didn't see the line through there, and I was like, you've got £51,000.
This is the finance committee, yeah?
That's why
Receives is the wrong bit, isn't it?
Okay,
Has access to an allowance
I think,
of
access to an
£500
allowance.
per annum.
Are we all happy with access to an allowance?
Yeah.
We don't need to vote on that. Certainly do. Okay, so would somebody like to make a proposal to adopt this with that change? Councillor Richardson?
It'll be that change plus the adding the bits that you said about the
It's alternative formats.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the available hard copy, etc.
Mhm.
And the second, Councillor Bickman, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. So next item, RFO finance reports, the 30th of September. To receive the finance report for the period the 1st to 30th of September. Before we reach up to questions, does the clerk have anything to say on this?
The clerk unfortunately has to inform the committee that last week I received the resignation of the finance officer. For personal reasons, journey time, but to some extent an element of the varied world of the public sector finance world in comparison to the commercial sector that she has so far had a very successful career in, and she's going to return to that sector. So it's not a detrimental view on this, it's just sometimes things make sense and our world makes little sense to many people.
It is, on that point, it is a noted fact with the LGA that there are positions within local government that obviously competing with the private sector that are just almost impossible to fill in all local government and all councils. So, yeah.
It's not
Thank
just
you for
us.
that, Chair.
Public sector.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
It is.
Anything else to mention from the report?
Just to say that there was nobody more kicking themselves than me when I got back the external auditor's clean audit to find that we'd forgotten to fill a box in at the bottom of it. Normally, Mazars and the other auditors that I've worked with would simply have said, can you just confirm the situation? It wouldn't be noted. BDO are a different variety of auditor. However, the box at the top is completely clear, so we have finally cleared off any legacy of not accounting our end of year correctly, and we now have a clear audit to move forward from. So I'm very pleased for that to happen.
Thank you very much to the clerk and the other officers for the work that's taken to achieve that.
I was just going to echo that. Thank you. I know it's difficult and it's hard, but you really did well with that. So thank you, and please mean it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or points on the?
There are a few resolutions embedded into it, if possible.
Yes.
So in an attempt to try and keep our current account below a large figure, we are proposing a transfer of £150,000 from the Unity Trust current account to the Unity Trust Savers account, which means that money can be moved back within the morning, as long as the Amazon web servers don't go down. And it does mean that we are mitigating the holdings that we have and ensuring that we have funds that we can use to the benefit of the residents, basically.
Thank you. Have a proposal for that? Councillor Richardson, a second. Councillor Barrett. All those in favour? Wonderful. Thank you. That carries.
Okay.
And then the next resolution to approve is to receive and approve the detailed list of payments and receipts by cost centre to the 30th of September 2025. Any questions on the list of payments and receipts?
There was a question regarding the payment for training allocated against the play inspection company.
Yeah.
Yes, they would normally be doing inspections of the playgrounds, but they also do the required RPSII training, I think it is called, for council employees. So that is our assets and open space officer who is going to get his certification so that he will be able to ensure that all the asset playgrounds that are moving across he's able to inspect and ensure that we stay within the health and safety guidelines.
Thank you very much. Do I have a proposer then to accept those? Councillor Richardson and a seconder. Councillor Marks. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. And then to receive the summary and net position reports to the 30th of September 2025. So we don't need to approve these, but if anybody has any questions on those.
So I see there's an amendment which at the bottom of the summary receipts and payments you'll see that it now has year-end adjustments, which means that the impact is that when you look back at the admin, particularly administration and legal fees, where we were showing an actual, sorry, ignore me completely because I've got the wrong report. The report that I printed off, and I'm not too sure if it's the report. Can you look at the report on here? I'm sorry.
Is it
Summary. Come down to the end. Okay.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Right, okay. Unfortunately, the wrong report's been attached, and I do apologise for that. I did receive the resignation on the day that all these papers had to go out, so I was running around. So the code, which is the year-end adjustments, what's been happened is a journal has been put in to ineffectively remove the year-end adjustments, the debtors and the creditors, and move them into a separate cost centre. But because the accounting software we use anyway actually cancels it out in year, we've then done a reversing out journal at the end of the year, so it looks correct in year and it will not create any problems at the end of the year. If I sent you the proper report, you would see actually that it has then affected the legal fees. So whereas it shows that we've spent £3,299.86, which was the remaining fee for cable works transfer that we paid in April, that was due for last year, it now says we've paid £240 instead. So that cancels that out, and it shows in year how much money we've got left.
Thank you very much.
Apologies.
Appreciate that change. Councillor Dixon.
I'm sure this is going to happen anyway, but can I ask that we receive the correct report with an explanation of the things that the clerk has just mentioned, because without seeing the report, don't mean a lot, I'm afraid. Although I obviously take on board what you're saying, reasons for it, but without actually the facts and figures.
There is a area in the finance report that actually does refer to that, but I will ensure that the correct report's sent out with an explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one other question as well, which was, there's a line 162 for this service charge, which currently has nil receipts, and we're halfway through the year, so I was wondering whether that has been invoiced and we're waiting for it to be paid, or if it's not yet been invoiced, then when is it going to be invoiced?
It hasn't yet been invoiced. We have only recently identified all of the utility supplies that relate to the social housing to Vivid. So we need to work those backwards as to how much we've paid for this year against the particular meters, and then invoice that, and then we'll have to do an invoice at the end of the year. So
Okay.
We are overflowing with a variety of meters for this building, including a few that aren't even in use.
Okay, that's fun. But thank you for answering my question. Brilliant. So we don't have to vote on anything there, because that was just to receive. And the next point is to note the election cost estimates that are provided by ABC, and they're also outlined on the financial report, as well as the additional attachment that break them down into different detailed points. Any questions on the election costs? Councillor Constable?
Yeah, just for clarification, is this calculated on the current boundaries of the town council? Okay, so when this council picks up the cost, will we only pick up the cost for the existing boundaries of the council, or will we be responsible for the new boundaries of the council?
So In all other things, we've actually had joint financial information sent through, whereas the elections, the Democratic team have split it between ourselves and Boyett Wood. That merging of everything will be coming back. Obviously, the reorganisation order, which we're anticipating to be written and approved in December, will reorganise the councils from the 1st of April. This election will take place and complete by something like the 6th of May, so therefore the bill will land to the new merged council. So, but there is a facility equivalent to our facility being held by our merging council, so we don't anticipate any issue. Sorry, is that what Councillor Phillip was about to say?
Go on.
Yeah, it was agreed last time, so £6,500.
Okay.
That's actually been set aside.
By Boyett Wood.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Second question, is it in scope for this council to run additional polling stations? Because I note that the borough will pick up the hire of the polling stations. Is that at the discretion of the borough, or is it at the discretion of this council? I appreciate it
I
would
don't
probably be too
believe
late
it
for
would
this
be
council.
with it. The actual running of the elections isn't something that we do.
No, we can request if there are reasons for additional polling stations. If we believe that the location of the polling stations will disadvantage our residents, we can make a request, formal request. They don't have to facilitate it. They will pass the costs.
So if we wanted to see that done for next year's election, would we need to bring that to Policy and Finance or full council? A proposal on that?
We would need a cost from EBC first of all, I would assume.
Okay.
I could take that action and ask for that
Yeah.
if the committee so wishes.
Okay.
That would be my
Okay.
preference if the committee's happy to.
There's no harm in exploring what the cost would be, I suppose.
It's just based on, in my work, the feedback that I've got from a lot of residents over the years is Kipling up to Lear Gardens is very out of the way, and after work, coming home and then having to walk into town, especially with it pouring with rain, is less than attractive. There are a couple of members of the public up there who are disabled and have found accessing polling stations very difficult. In previous years, been able to arrange transport or emergency proxy votes for those members that were unable due to ill health, but that comes with additional question marks as to that relies on individual councillors doing that, whereas actually having a polling station up there might make it easier. Thinking specifically of my ward, I'm sure there are examples in other councillors' wards as well that you can think of, but it is something that I've had feedback on since I've been involved in Eastleigh politics, is the lack of access up there.
Understood. Thank you. It's probably worth reminding everyone and also members of the public that postal votes are available for such occasions as well, and to sign up for those as soon as possible so that they're in place. Sorry, yes, Councillor Martin.
Sorry, I apologise because we've skipped one and I've just thought of it. I'm ever so sorry, Chair. And that was, you know, the co-opted councillors that we've got. Where is the cost? Did it cost us anything to do that?
No.
No.
No, they're free.
Yeah.
There's no election, so
It's only an election that you
You're
have to pay.
freely.
I suppose
It's not costing anything.
it's probably also worth noting, just for information, that obviously this is the cost where election is held. If there are, if the number of nominations matches the number of vacancies, then there's no need to actually hold an election. So potentially, we may not have to pay all of this, as was the case when this council was formed. But hopefully, in the interest of democracy, we will have more candidates than seats, so there is actually a contest. So anyway. That's any other. Is that all for the election costs?
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. So now we're on to the budget for 26-27. To receive and review the budget setting process with timelines and dependencies. Would the clerk like to say anything about this?
It's exactly the same format and report that you received this time last year. All I have done is updated the dates on the second on the timeline. Second page. And have I probably time travelled?
Councillor Richardson.
I'm just going to congratulate the clerk on getting the dates correct. They all look correct to me.
Yeah, the answer says obviously it's not a direct copy because you've added in the cross-council budget meeting. I think, yeah.
Yes,
for the
and
merged council.
I know that I've put that as number 7, and I know I've put it after the personnel meeting, but it just went into a position before this committee re-met to actually look at the figures.
Wonderful. Any other questions on that one? The only thing that I noted was bearing in mind what you've just said about it's just been put in somewhere. I think it would be useful for committees to have costs from Boyle Wood Council that will inform their budget setting before they then discuss their budget setting. So, for example, assets will need to know how much income and cost there is associated with Boyle Wood allotments before they can decide what the budget's going to be for allotments, I would have thought, for next year. So I don't know whether that's around the order that meetings happen, or if it's just about making sure that that information is available to that committee before they have that meeting.
Oh, sorry. I know that the clerk at Boyle Wood is putting together a example budget of what would be anticipated, and obviously is talking with her council to get their feedback. So I believe those figures will be provided to merge in sooner rather than later, is my anticipation. She's very efficient.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Vickman, would you have a
Thanks, Chair. That's the question. So, and then there'll be a supplementary stroke follow-up. When is the latest we can have a full council meeting to review and approve the budget?
With Borough Council approval, by law, we can go to the end of February before we approve our precept demand. But it all depends on the council meetings for Eastleigh Borough Council as to how they fit in.
Their budget meeting will be in February.
Yes, it usually you can give an indicative precept demand, which will allow them to actually fulfil that meeting. With a confirmed precept demand afterwards, but you need to be 99% of the way there unless, you know.
The only reason I ask is because we have some things that we're not in control of at this moment in time with our budget setting process. One of that is assets and what comes across and with what monies and what maintenance, which will impact on our revenue and how that's paid. Especially, and the whole thing with special expenses and everything. You already mentioned Boyle Wood Council as well. So this is all quite tight in what is a quite tight time of year anyway. So I wonder if it would be prudent, as EBC does, albeit it's only a few days, but to have a reserve date for full council to review and approve the budget, so that if need be, and there is slippage, then actually we can have, amongst councillors and what have you, we can find another date as reserve date for full council for the budget, because obviously we've got to get the budget right. And Clark's just said we haven't got an admin officer, so conscious of the finance officer. So there's a lot of work here. Sorry, did I not tell you?
We very much do have an admin officer.
So there's a lot of work here for staff. There's a lot of work here for councillors of the various committees and what have you. And it's not something that you want to rush. Equally, it's not something you want to take forever doing either, for obvious reasons. And that. So I just wonder if it would be sensible and prudent to have a reserve date, so if things do need to be pushed back a couple of weeks, perhaps to the end of January, and it fits with Eastleigh Borough Council and what have you, then it might be prudent to do such a thing, and then we can push. We can still have full council on the 14th and discuss everything else, but we can have an extraordinary meeting later in January, or early February, to actually finalise the budget. the closer we can get to the deadline and all the figures lining up and being accurate and everything, then the better, because then there's less guesswork. I mean, you know, budgets are always you know, your best guess at any particular moment in time anyway. But yeah, that would be a suggestion of mine.
I think that's a good point. I don't think we actually need a formal proposal here to change that, do we? It's just a note or an action to think about that. Yeah,
It's
okay,
just
wonderful.
it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that sounds prudent. Any other comments on this timeline? I don't think we're actually voting to approve this, it's just to review, so if we're happy with that, then we'll move on to the budget assumptions, which is to approve, so review and approve. Thank you to the clerk for preparing these. Do you have anything to say on these before we discuss?
No, apart from the fact, obviously, they are for discussion. They're for amendment in addition to. I may have put a couple of extras in, but I am looking to this committee to actually put in the assumptions that they believe that the budget should be built upon.
Thank you. Any queries or points at this stage? Councillor Constable.
Just thanks to the clerk for making it nice and easy. It was the same last year. We've got a really solid set of assumptions here that any member of the public can read and clearly understand the decision-making process that we will be looking at, and it's really comprehensive. And I would propose that we accept it as written, because it is so comprehensive. Everything's been considered. The thing that I was looking for in there immediately was that there was reference to the fact that we're merging with councils was already in there. Very, very good job, and thank you.
Councillor Constable, anyone else?
Just to support what Councillor Constable said, I particularly am keen on point 14. I know it's something the clerk and I have discussed previously, is about the new council having almost like a mini local area committee set up where each ward can have a little pot of money to do what they want to do, the councils for that ward to spend, and that's in there, so that's really good. The point in point 6 is regarding community grants, very much in favour of, and there's the bit about the sponsorship. So we currently have a budget for sponsorship, don't we?
Yeah.
And I think that number 6 is basically saying, well, whether we review the requirement of having that to free up funds for other things. So I'm personally in favour of doing away with that, perhaps topping up the community grants pot a little bit more and leaving the rest of that money for other things. We were chatting today, and for example, that fund could go towards supporting the family support worker. That's quite a big chunk of the cost that it could be spent on instead of the sponsorship. So yeah, that's one that I'm pleased to see a change of personally.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? Councillor Whitman?
The only thing I would say with reference to budget is we need to see some different options with the overall budget. I mean, what's down here is really good, but I mean, obviously we need to see a budget where there is no precept increase, because that's our base, and what that would actually do. We obviously need a budget where everything that's been agreed through strategic, staffing and everything else is included, to see how much that puts up the precept by, because then decisions might need to be actually made on projects, and then obviously somewhere in the middle. Obviously CPI is where's that actually? Well, which month is it taken from for budget purposes? Is it September CPI?
It's normally September.
Yeah. So they've got that anyway already. So that's the only thing I would like to see, is a number of options, and what it actually does for precept, if it does anything at all, because obviously there's a whole thing of special expenses.
I'm sure that will come to the subsequent meetings where we're considering the budgets to look at. And just a couple of things from me. So the first one is, obviously we've got a range of inflation measures there that are quite a spread, and I just wondered whether the clerk had a recommendation on the particular figure that we should use for our assumptions going forward.
we traditionally use the Bank of England. I gave you the different statistics because the Bank of England have not been correct for this year, and the Chamber of Commerce has, and you can see there's a slight difference between them, quite considerably really. And if we are putting percentages on our external costs because of that, the little bits do actually add up.
Well, that's why I feel like we need to pick a number that you can use in your budget assumptions going forward. So, is there a particular number you would recommend?
I think the Statista actually gives you the one of the averages, and my brain is broken this evening. 2.1 moving into 2% into 2027, so an average of 2% really to apply to external pressures that are on the budget.
Okay. Sorry, did anybody else want to come in on that point? That's the big one.
I was just going to ask the question, what was the CPI according to the Bank of England in September? And then secondly, given the fact that why not use the same figure that Eastleigh Council do for consistency across everyone, bearing in mind that all council tax bills will come on a bit of paper headed up Eastleigh Council?
I suppose that depends on whether we agree with EBC's measure of inflation.
Well, it depends on what they've taken it as. Let's say usually it's CPI in September, and of course they have their own financial advisors that they pay. Army Close who have been fairly spot on, and if that's what they use, and effectively we're getting Army Close figures for free.
So CPI in September was 3.9%, down from the 4% in August.
I'm glad you kept, that's what I googled as well, but I wanted somebody else to do it as well to make sure I've done it right.
Okay. I feel like we need to pick a figure. So the clerk has suggested 2% from the statistic.
This is only it's only a percentage that's applied to external pressures on the budget, and some are significantly more. We have a budget statement coming very soon that may have impact on employment, employers' national insurance contributions, workers' rights. So as we stand today, it's a secure figure. I think 3.9 is an interesting figure for a borough council to pick because it happens to be exactly in line with the allowable increase. But if you ask me, my recommendation would be 2%.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Constable.
I propose actually that we use the Bank of England 2.5 for Core 4, just because they're the rate setter, and if we're pleasantly surprised and inflation is less persistent than expected, which I grant it is the indicator currently, but inflation is not the stable thing that it once was, and given the current interesting policies from some corners of the world that are inflicting inflationary pressures, I would much rather be pessimistic and follow the rate setter than follow, while I completely agree with the Clerk's logic, they have got it wrong, and statistics have got it right. That doesn't necessarily mean that going into next year that won't be the case.
That's a good one.
I would agree with Councillor Constable. I would actually be far happier to follow the Bank of England percentage, given the they are the rate setter, and they are the Bank of England. We can't leave it, I guess, to the budget when things might change. We might end up with extra costs on staff because of the national insurance payment and such like. But also I'd just like to make a correction. Eastleigh Borough Council, I'm not aware that they have set their figure at this particular moment of time, so I don't know whether they've chosen 3.9% which was the CPI in September. So I'd just like to correct that point, please.
Thank you. I'm also minded to go with something that's slightly higher, just because if the current or the most recent figure was 3.9%, then it seems prudent to go with a slightly higher figure than 2%. So can I make the proposal that we go with 2.5%? Would anybody like to second that proposal? Councillor Constable.
Support the joke.
So all those in favour of 2.5%? Wonderful, thank you. And thank you very much for your guidance. It's not ignored, it's just very much taken into account for this.
And it's nice to have options.
Absolutely. The other points I wanted to make, so item 10, it says to continue to provide ongoing training to councillors and officers alike. I suggest that we expand this, because obviously we've got elections next year, which means it's very likely we're going to have new councillors. So to expand this point to say that we'll make sure there's ample provision for the onboarding, induction of new councillors, as well as the ongoing training of any continuing councillors. That was point 10. Point 14, so the local identities one. I agree in principle with the idea of having these sort of devolved budgets for wards. I'm just a little bit concerned about the idea of wards granting, wards having grants, which may potentially conflict with the community grants that we're awarding as a council more broadly. So I think personally I'd want to remove the wording about granting facility, but otherwise happy with that point being in there. Don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that one.
I think that's a good idea actually. Just remove the granting facility of, so it says award £2,000 each. I think logic makes sense. I'm just thinking though, separate to this guidance, this committee is going to need to put some guidance in place for when that needs to be given out by, because I remember in our first year getting to the end of the year and us being kind of a panic rush to spend the grant budget that we hadn't spent any of in our first year. We've got a dearth of new councillors. We might be in a very similar position, and that money which could do, again, I think in the scope of the budget that we've got, that's such a cost-effective way of improving wards. I was really happy to see it. So I want to see that money get spent. So this committee just needs to very strongly give guidance on when that needs to be spent by, so it does happen. But completely support you on that.
My final point was that I think that point 15 should actually probably be point 1 or point 2. So that's to be mindful in this process that our residents under financial pressures. I think it's an important point that we shouldn't lose track of. And whilst I'm not suggesting that these are in prioritised order, I think it's just helpful to have it up front as a reminder. Councillor Bickman.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I agree with that. It could even be, rather than use a box, it could, well, no, there isn't a sort of preamble. But yes, I mean, and that actually with the whole budget setting process needs to be the overriding thing. What we have in front of us here has been very well put together and should make the process easier, but is it affordable? And that will be the key when it comes down to budget. Is it affordable? Can we afford to do this stuff? Do we want to put up a preset by that much to be able to afford it? So actually number 15.
I just like to remind Councillor Bickman that's the point of the budget setting process. So these are just the assumptions for setting the budget and coming up with the proposals. We will then agree in subsequent meetings whether the proposal in front of us is one that we think is affordable or not. So I appreciate the point, but I also want to make sure we're focused on the point that's in front of us, the papers in front of us.
Can I just clarify that I can't count, however? So there are 12, 13, 14, 15, 15. So 15, when you're referring to 15, Chair, I assume you're referring to what should be 16?
Yes. Yes, I am.
I'm surprised you didn't spot that.
I didn't.
No.
Okay. So we have accepted 2.5% to be the inflationary figure, and I'd like to suggest, I've forgotten everything that I said. What was it? To remove the reference to grants from 14.
And under section 10, expand to say providing for onboarding and induction of new councillors.
That's right. And then to move 15B/16 to be number 1. So with those changes, do we have a proposer? Councillor Richardson and Councillor Barrett seconding, and all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. And then the last point in the budget was to confirm the Community Governance Review Working Group suggestion for an overarching budget meeting for the merged councils and agree format.
It's on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not there.
There is no format.
That's right, it's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
So this is the working group that's been formed between Wood Parish Council and Eastleigh Town Council to look at arrangements for the merging of the councils going forward. And we suggested that we should have a meeting where we all come together without separate costs to kind of have a meeting of minds and agree what the costs are going to be collectively for the new council. I think that's reasonable. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, and obviously Boyett Wood doesn't run committees, delegated committees, so all their decisions are made through full council.
Thank you. Agree the format on that point. Agree the format for the meeting, presumably.
To some extent, agree the outcome that you wish to gain from it. Is it a discussion really of a desire of what that? Because what you'll find is that everybody will want to discuss what can happen going forward. Well, that's to some extent work that should have been done within the council. So if it's bringing the two different budgets together, then that's something that the Clerk RFOs can do. So it's to understand what the outcomes, what the objectives of that meeting are, so that people come with answers and thoughts and ideas relating to that.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you just invite people into a room.
Understood. Does anybody have any thoughts on this at the moment? Councillor Bush?
I would suggest just the chair, vice chairs. I think that would be agree. I think too many people, it would it's not going to work.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts on what the objective for the meeting should be? I'm looking at Councillor Richardson as well. So. Chair of Council and also the person who is at the working group meeting. I'm trying to remember what we thought we were going to get from it. Councillor Percival.
It's kind of hard to know what we should set without knowing the mechanics of that meeting, because obviously that meeting could make a binding decision. It could make a recommendation for the two councils to then consider. But if we're going to do, and I do agree with Councillor Phillips' logic, I think actually having a smaller meeting between the chairs and RFOs is probably the best way to go. But we would need to send our chair with a clear view to enable that to be an effective meeting, because otherwise, again, it's just two people sat in a room talking about whatever. Whether the actual thing that this council recommends is that Boyett would consider our budget recommendations to inform their own budgetary decisions. But again, it's non-binding, whatever we go into there with. Because my biggest concern is there is cost disparities between the two authorities, and there is an interest in both councils to have the costing that they've arrived at, whereas in the new council, when we have the new councillors elected, we would be setting budgets collectively. Right now we're setting them as two separates. So my biggest concern is that we come out of that with a productive resolution if we're going to have this meeting and not a split decision, because if that's going to be the outcome, we might as well not have that meeting and just set our own budgets and then absorb Boyett Woods in next year, because otherwise you're going to have two budget proposals.
Yes. Yes.
As I understand it, and this is one thing I haven't done before, the reorganisation order that's written in December gives the power of budget setting demand, preset demand, only to the Eastleigh Town Council as the remaining council. So while Boyett Wood can have very much need to set an example budget to give the indicative figures, ultimately that setting of that precept demand that is to be paid in April lands with the 17 councillors who represent Eastleigh Town Council.
And that's my concern, is that you have Boyett Wood, a recommendation budget that is higher or lower. Their agreement can't be reached between the two chairs on what the absorption should be, and you immediately start off the merger in a point of conflict between the existing councillors in there, who we must presume will be seeking re-election. So we would be, maybe, this is my point, is basically maybe we'd be better off not to have that meeting and to have invite the Boyett Wood councillors to our budget meeting to speak during public participation, or give them a protected time for those Boyett Wood councillors to make a representation at our budget setting meeting, rather than then, because then it's the terms of the discussion are Eastleigh Town Council's budget rather than two budgets.
Okay. Let's just make a note of that for now. Councillor Barrett.
I'm just wondering whether we're looking too low on this, too deep into it. Basically, Boyett Wood already has a budget, so this year the precept will be, we know what they've got, we know what they can ask for, we've got our budget, so I'm just wondering whether we're looking too small on it and not seeing the bigger picture. We know exactly, or we will know exactly what they spend, what they're doing, and we know what their situation is. So when we set the budget, because we'll set it for them as you mentioned, Ruth, we'll just allow the increase that we feel is necessary to continue what they're doing and whatever future projects they've got and are saving for, we're aware of. I think the details of it at this stage is not really worth going into. You'd be talking all night with a group of people in here from both councils, and really I think we should be looking at a higher picture, overviewing it.
Okay.
That's my view on it.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that's why we wanted to set objectives for the meeting, so that they're not talking all night. However, now I'm wondering if there is actually a suggestion that we don't take this forward at all. I don't know. I mean, what I thought was interesting, for what Councillor Constable was saying, I wondered if actually the objective should be around reviewing the discrepancies in charges and costs between the two councils and coming to a conclusion and a recommendation that could come to this committee around how those discrepancies would be resolved for the budget setting going forward. That feels like a fairly straightforward objective and a fairly confined scope that would mean that we don't end up talking all night, hopefully. I think Councillor Phillips has
agree with your points there. I think my proposal of having the chairs and vice chairs all a group, a very small group in there to discuss budget, more broadly the Boyett Wood budget, because how that's going to impact. Because I think it is important, because as I say, Boyett Wood's completely different to what goes on here.
No,
what that's, yeah, and you know, and I think it's massively important that that budget is scrutinised and that be at that meeting, because you know, going through it, we can actually move forward and actually say we have a better idea when we meet. Take it, because you know, that would be a concern.
I think it potentially needs to be an opportunity for Boyett Wood to make its representation around what it sees as its priorities and costs. that may not necessarily be things they want to share in a public meeting. Just thinking about Councillor Constable's earlier point around making that point in a public meeting. Councillor Bickman, did you go?
Yeah, it's just a sort of question. I mean, at the moment, we've got two councillors who are doing two budgets and setting two different precepts. At the end of the day, when we merge, someone's got to pay more, someone's got to pay less, or there's got to be some harmony across the precept. And it's sort of like, how on earth are we going to get that sorted, ready for, first week in, start of financial year, first week in April? Or will it be a case that there is a difference in precept and we have to harmonise it as we go into next year's budget process?
Councillor
I can respond to that point. They're not setting a precept.
No.
They're not setting any budget
No.
because they won't exist.
Then,
So there will be no budget, there'll be nothing. We are the ones that are setting the budget on their behalf for Boyd Woods area.
So
They can recommend this is what they would like to see within our budget, but they're not physically setting anything. As soon as that reorganisation order is made, they will not exist from the 1st of April or whatever date it is.
I think that the important thing to recognise is that we will be setting the precept that covers the whole area, but we don't currently have any elected representatives on our council from that area. So I think this meeting, in a formal sense, there are no councillors who are here today who are here to represent Boyerwood. I accept that there are members here who are also members of Boyerwood, but that's a different way of looking at it. But there still needs to be an opportunity for the representatives of the Boyerwood area to be able to make their point, I think. I've forgotten who put their hand up first. I think it was Councillor Constable.
Oh, okay.
But Councillor Bowden.
Can I ask the clerk a question? Ruth, are we able to find out what the precept is at the moment for Boyerwood? And is it higher or lower than what we precept as a property?
It is lower.
It's definitely lower. I can tell you that. They're a smaller council, so their precept is lower. Although, are you
When I say
actually,
precept, I mean
you're referring
perhaps.
to the Band D equivalent?
It's about half of ours.
I'm not quite following. I may not be asking correctly.
So
What each resident property pays, is it lower or higher than what? Because we're around, I can't remember what it is now.
That's
Per
So,
house.
so ours is 77.57,
Yeah.
£77 and 57 pence, because we included special expenses in ours,
What are those?
and theirs is £51 and 6 pence.
Right.
So the tax base has been released by EBC. The new merged Eastleigh Town tax base will be 8,469 and 98.98, and that is the Eastleigh Town area of 5,975.58 and Boyett Wood of 2,350.04. But there is now no line on the EBC precept demand for Eastleigh Town and Boyett Wood. There is only Eastleigh Town with an asterisk after it, which is notating the new Eastleigh Town parish, including Boyett Wood.
So if I may go on just a bit further, so when we set our precept, we're actually setting a precept for Boyett Wood as well at the same time. And of course, if we're at 70 odd per house, and it's going to be a massive jump for them.
Well, it might not be.
No.
If you don't increase the budget, the share of Eastleigh residents will pay will be reduced. Theirs might go up slightly, but the Eastleigh one will come down.
That's what I was going to
If the budget is exactly the same, we've got more people paying, so naturally the average price comes down for everybody. Theirs might go
indeed.
up,
Yes,
but ours
yeah,
will
ours
come
come down. Yeah, on the balance out.
Councillor Constable.
So that's what I was going to suggest is the topic of conversation should be on adopting a precept on the new tax base, the precept currently set by Boyett Wood for the financial year we're currently in, so on the existing budgets, and then a discussion on the assumed cost of taking on the new assets. Not saying we will have a defined cost at that point, but an assumed cost. So then there's a clear point discussion of reviewing what does it look like if we set your precept demand, what does it look like if we set our precept demand, is there a shared recommendation, and the objective ultimately of that meeting should be to have a precept demand backed by both chairs and vice chairs of both councils. And because it would not be a binding decision, it can be done privately, so you can go into in-depth discussion, you can go into the confidential matters that are before this council relating to assets, and have that kind of detailed discussion and a recommendation coming from that group on this is what we discussed. That's a clear defined objective there.
It is. I'm personally a little bit concerned that it feels like I think it could be too leading or binding, I think the right word, that members of this council will then feel like they've already predetermined what the result should be before they go into the council meeting to set the precept. I wonder if the objective should actually be around agreeing some kind of parameters of where we would like to set, where we would like the precept to end up for the benefit of all residents, rather than saying it's going to be this much. Because I feel like that's too firm an agreement at that point. Does that make?
I would say though, if you're not going to set a defined objective like that, and it isn't broader, then those representations can be made to this council by Boyarwood councillors during public participation or an alternative provision, and that would inform all councillors. So if we're going to have a broader spectrum of it, then there's no reason not to do that in a public setting. If we're having narrow detail, then there is a reason to have it in.
I wasn't suggesting there wouldn't be detail. I was saying that the objective of the meeting would be to agree the parameters of where they would like to see the precept end up. Yeah, but I don't think we can say as much as that there will be an agreement for that meeting what the precept will be, because that meeting can't decide that. So
Do we have knowledge
yes.
of Boyarwood? Sorry.
Can I just put a caveat on trying to follow a precept? So your precept is your precept including your special expenses. There is special expenses that are due to be transferred to Eastleigh Town Council. There are also special expenses that are due to be transferred to Boyarwood. Proportionally, the total figures are bigger coming to Eastleigh Town Council than they are coming to Boyarwood, but that's on a lower tax base, so in actually their special expenses will have a greater impact on their precept increase than ours, and there's just too many variables to actually sit there and say we're 77, they're 51. Special expenses could wipe all of that difference out in a single calculation. So you could go with the principle, which is that unless things change, that both councils wish to maintain a precept element before additional special expenses that were comparable. But again, you can't take 51 and 77 and just find the average in between, because that doesn't represent the costs. But there will be cost savings. As to your previous point, which was to find the charges and find the levels, well, we actually, there's only one whatever the word is, a joint charging element, which is the allotments. And with the recent allotment amendments to pricing as of the 1st of April, it's given the opportunity for Boyarwood to actually look at their charges, because they don't have to notify us quickly. And I think the difference between the councils is something like 25 pence per rod, so it's negligible, and because Boyarwood's slightly different, so so the comparables have already been levelled out, because obviously everybody's known that this is happening potentially for a long time.
Okay, thank you. That's the difference.
It would seem to me that we're talking about precepts, but actually what's going to happen is you're going to combine the two councils, and the precept is going to be the final figure that comes out after the calculation is done and is divided by the number of people, as it is with our budget at the moment and Boyarwood's individually. So actually, what we actually need is we need their expenses, so that we actually know the overall revenue budget for both councils combined. I don't quite know how we go about cost savings with staff and what have you, if there is any, or we just leave it as it is at the moment and deal with that in subsequent years.
That's what the officers are discussing in a minute.
And then, it then comes down to the aspirations of the two councils on future projects. And that's the discussion that, and I think Councillor Phillips was probably right, that the chairs and vice chairs and the clerks need to have, because there's going to, once you combine the two existing revenue budgets and you come out with a precept of X, you then got to get agreement on that. If you haven't got agreement, so that give you a precept of X, you chuck in the aspirations of both councils, that will give you a precept of Y, then actually you've then got to, through the actual councils, you've then got to come up with something that's agreeable somewhere between X or Y, unless, Y is agreed. And that's where you then start having the discussions around the aspirations. Our strategic plan, the things that we want to do, the things that they want to do, are they affordable? And that is where you need to have the discussion. And I would agree with Councillor Phillips' suggestion that it's the chair and the vice chair, and it doesn't have to be a public meeting to start with, to have that, that discussion. And then if you wanted to formalise that discussion, then that, that could potentially come back to a public meeting. And then obviously then what will happen is both chairs and vice chairs of each council will have to go back to their members and say, well actually, we've got this aspiration of doing this, but we can't afford it. We need to trim our list of aspirations and what have you, and that. And to me that sounds, the way to go and the structure to have, and the format to have, on actually the green budget. The actual numbers, I'm going to say in inverted commas, are relatively easy. And I say that in inverted commas with tongue in cheek, because they are just numbers, and a lot of them are fact, because we actually know, from previous years what things cost.
Yeah.
But it's the aspirations and the things that both councils have agreed to do in the future, and want to do in the future, that come with a cost.
Yeah.
And then that will change, change the precepts. And how much, depending on how much then ours goes down, theirs goes up, or both go up, and that's where the discussions need to be.
Okay. Councillor Mason?
I think that's a really good idea. I think we've basically set a scope for the discussion there as well of what are the projects of your council, what are the projects of our council. It's a fact finder for the chairs and vice chairs to go and then bring back to this council for informing the decision making process of, I've spoken to Boywood councillors and their current projects are X, Y and Z. This is what they would like considered, and then we discuss as the decision maker. But they then actually Boywood has had an opportunity to input directly onto the decision making. That's a very fair way, I think, of conducting what is, an awkward arrangement at the end of the day.
Okay. I think that sounds like an objective. I think what I would add to that is that there's a prioritisation of those aspirations, because then that will put us in a position that we can then think about, well actually we can't afford all of this, so we know where to start knocking things off if we can't afford it all, for example. I'm not saying that will be the case, but I'm just saying that if that is the case, then it helps to have it prioritised. Okay.
And just one caveat with that, Chair, is as this council has to be minded that, and something that Councillor Constable said earlier, that actually we can't prioritise all of our things and jettison everything from Boyd Wood.
Yes.
There's got to be a compromise in there, and that.
But then that's
basically, even if we don't necessarily agree in like what their actual proposal is.
But then this meeting is an opportunity to do that, because it's
But also we must understand that it isn't ours and theirs, it will be
Ours.
ours.
absolutely.
Indeed.
Yes.
And there will be a new council. And
Absolutely.
there'll be people sitting here from Boywood who will put their point forward, as we do for our individual boards. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just conscious the agenda says agree, doesn't say
Doesn't say
approve
resolve,
or
it just
resolve,
says
so
agree.
let's just do agree. So is that enough?
Yes. Well, yes,
Do we
because
have what we need?
we have moved from it being proposed as a two council meeting to back into the chair, vice chair and clerk RFO meeting, with the aspirations to be agreed, the projects of both councils to be laid out, and a prioritisation of those projects. You know, if you had to deliver one, which one would it be?
Yes. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your going along with that discussion. We appreciate it. In which case, the final item is the date of the next meeting, which is the 10th of December.
Thank you.
10th of December.
Yes. Meeting closed. There it is.